Namaste to everyone. So the title of the course is Indian Knowledge Landscape. I reserve to define these three terms for my next session. What do we mean by the term Indian? What is understood as knowledge? And what do we mean by the term systems? Because landscape and system, we are trying to use it as synonyms in this particular context. A lot of buzz has been created around this Indian knowledge systems right now, at least in India where I live. The government has been trying to push the Indian knowledge systems into the mainstream academia. But there is still a lot of confusion regarding this term and what it signifies. How is it different from the existing Indological studies? So we thought of creating a clear-cut definition of what we or what has to be covered under the term Indian knowledge systems. And in this, we will get to know the entire spectrum of the knowledge systems of which originated in Bharat and which has influenced. So I'll quickly get into the main subject matter itself. Let me share the screen. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we are able to see it.
I'm just not able to navigate.
You might actually want to minimize the window where you are seeing the shared screen and directly control the window that you're sharing.
Okay. So how do I do that?
You can see a browser window where you can see the call where you are right now.
Yeah.
So you can reduce the size by dragging the corner of that window, and then the other window where you have the presentation that will become visible to you also, and then you can just navigate on that window directly.
Yeah, I think I got it.
Yeah. If it keeps troubling you, I should be able to get you some support in presentation. If you share the link of the presentation with me, I can do that on your behalf.
Okay, I'll do that. Or is this okay? Whatever is coming up on the screen, is it visible?
Yes, it probably needs to be zoomed in a little bit, but that's also because I'm on a smaller device. I think it is fairly reasonable. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm very sorry. I just take some time to learn this. So coming directly to the subject matter, when we understand the term Bharata, the term Bharata itself has a very clear-cut uh, connotation towards Indians or India being a knowledge-centric society. Because we have been hearing this, that the Indian knowledge systems is not just one of the oldest ones, but it's a complete, it's an holistic knowledge system. The term Bharata itself suggests that we were a knowledge-centric society, a society that was something that set us apart from the rest during the period. So when we define Bharata in the Vishnu Puran, we have the most famous verse which defines the boundaries of the Bharata. It says that Uttaram Yat Samudrasya, that which is to the north of the Indian Ocean or the Samudra, Himadres Chaiva Dakshinam, and that which is to the south of the Himalayas, that entire landscape is called as Bharata. Varsham Tad Bharatam. But the last quarter of the verse is the most important thing. Bharati Yatra Santati. It is called as Bharata because Bharati resides there. The Bharati is not merely the descendants of Bharata or Bharata. It is also a term used to refer to the goddess of learning, Saraswati. So when we say Bharati Santati, it means where the divine goddess of learning resides. Is it merely this much, or is there anything more to read into this particular nomenclature, Bharata? To know this, this is the key to understanding the characteristics of the Indian civilization. The term Bharata consists of two components. It's a compounded word, it's a samasta pada in Sanskrit, which has two components, the root bha and rata, which once again comes from ram, ran, rati. Bha means to shine. That is why we have common terms such as prabha for light or bhaskar for sun. It is all related with bha, to shine. And the term rata means to be attached, a person who is attached. So Bharata means the play, and by light, and light has always been a metaphor for knowledge. So when we say Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, we are not referring to a physical space of darkness and a well lit up place. It is from ignorance to wisdom. So tamas or darkness is a metaphor for ignorance, while the light has been a constant metaphor for knowledge. So when we say ha, or to shine, or the light, it is knowledge. So people who were naturally affiliated to knowledge. So the term Bharata itself means the land of, or where the society is knowledge centric. So ours was a knowledge centric society. And during the course of these 10 or 11 sessions, we will try to understand in what manner this knowledge systems were embedded in our day-to-day activities, in our thought process, and in our dealings with the external world. Everywhere, this knowledge centrism played a very, very key role. And another term to remember in this context is the term dharma. It's a very hard term to translate. So now we have a new way of expressing it as a non-translatable. But dharma normally means anything that holds, anything that bears. So when we refer to Bharata, it is referring to the people who not only take forward the knowledge centrism, but they also support upholding the dharma. It is very, very clear in the activities of the people who truly belong to this land, who have been trained in this knowledge system, that we have always chosen dharma over anything else. Okay, with this, let's quickly move on to the next important aspect that we shall try to cover. What are our civilizational aspirations? What did our rishis and our ancestors, and because we don't have anyone to call as founding fathers, so what did they have, or what did they prescribe as our civilizational aspiration? So what defines our goals and identity as a civilization? Have we made any meaningful and a lasting contribution to the world? Why does understanding our civilizational influence matter in today's context? All these, I feel, are pertinent to be raised and answered, especially in the current situation where there is a systematic attempt to debunk the facts as myths, where there has been a very gradual and a very powerful movement that has been working towards cultural genocide of the Indian knowledge systems by entering into the mainstream academia itself. We have always been open for debate, but what we have not been prepared for is, like one of my friend uses this term, is we were very, very aware of the Shastras. So we had the Shastra Bodha, but we failed multiple times in understanding our enemies and our near enemies. Shatru Bodha. We had the Shastra Bodha, but we failed in the Shatru Bodha. So there are enemies who directly oppose us, but more dangerous are near enemies. It's the term near enemies is used in the Buddhist works. So it's a very interesting topic by itself. So this has been an attempt to raise these questions and try to seek an answer to these questions is very, very pertinent, not just to have a kind of a civilizational pride, but if at all we want this to continue, if at all we want our knowledge systems to be passed on to the coming generations, not merely as a thing of an antique value, because if that is the case, then it is not sustainable. But to show that what we have is the most, it has survived thousands of years because it was a kind of a sustainable system. To understand this, it is very important to go and ask these questions to us. So, as what do we mean by civilization? We as conscious being, we seek knowledge. And what is the knowledge what we speak about? The knowledge is to understand the surroundings around us. And when this develops, And when we codify, it becomes a system. We shall see more about it in the upcoming session. The same knowledge systems are also embedded in plants and animals, but they are more or less embedded in their biology. It is to suit their ecosystem. It's more of intuitive in nature. Whereas for the humans, it is a kind of a collective consciousness. So we speak of civilization. Civilization is as important to us as much as the memory is to the consciousness, and the consciousness is to an individual. So the history and the civilization, these are two things that are very, very key and very, very pertinent to the collective society. So the civilization begins to appear when the system is working. There is a proper relationship between man and the surroundings around him. And it is always based on a very, very clear policy of not transactional, but where it is mutual coexistence. So, hyper commodification that we see today is not the sustainable model. That is why we have to go to our roots to see how our civilization preached or how our civilization lived on for centuries. Yeah. So the current situation was summed up by Anand Kumar Swamy almost 100 years back. So he made it a very, very clear that even though we will be studying Indian subjects or about India, it will be mostly through the European lens. We will be viewing it through the European lens. So we are not, that's the whole funda of uh, Oriental studies. And Oriental studies is the study of the Orient from the Occidental lens. Unfortunately, the entire generation post-independence of India were trained to look at their own systems wearing the Western lenses. So the opportunity to correct is at the doorstep. Let's see how best it can be made use by the government policies and others. So did we make any contribution? Today session is more about historical overview. So yes, we did. That's an obvious answer. We had historical connections with the globe. We all know. Most importantly, we not only were concerned with the materials, but we were equally concerned with the development of the person. So personality development and the material development were equally emphasized so that the person knows how to handle maturely the materials that he gets to possess. The cultural influence of Indian thoughts across at least the Southeast Asia is still felt, and the fact that it controlled the trade, the global trade, is another. So we have made we have made substantial contributions to it. All these contributions. How were these contributions made to such an extent that we speak of? So that is the key. So whether it is India's position amongst the older classical civilizations, whether it is about the continuity of Indian civilization, all these, it leads to once again one common point of India being a knowledge-centric society, and that defining each and every aspect of the Indian civilization. So, coming to the historicity, we all know about uh, the Mohenjo-daro and the Harappan civilization. Today, we refer to it as Saraswati Sindhu civilization because more sites are discovered or excavated on the banks of the river Saraswati. Pre-independence, most of the sites went during the partition to the Pakistan. So after that, when Dr. B.B. Lal started the excavations, they made substantial discoveries and they found most of the cities being located either in between the Sindhu or the Indus and the Saraswatis, whose um, path has been traced convincingly, or more on the other side of the Saraswati. So, adding the name Saraswati Sindhu Valley Civilization, which makes more sense. There have been a lot of studies uh, in the genome mapping of the Harappans. The samples collected from sites as far as in Kashmir. There are Harappan sites in Kashmir. There are Harappan sites up till Gujarat and the mainlands of the Rajasthan, Haryana, and other places. So, a genome project, an extensive genome project, has genetic mapping project has been carried out, led by Dr. Vasant Shinde, and those studies clearly show that the descendants or the current Indians spread across India, including the southern part of the India, they all share, most of them share the genetic ancestry or from the Harappans. So the whole idea of Aryan invasion theory and which is already debunked, then it turned to Aryan migration theory. So now it's our turn to propose the out of India theory. So civilizationally, we can at least trace or have archaeological evidences that goes back to 5000 plus before the Common Era. And the sites that have been excavated clearly show that it was the society which lived, it was clearly very, very advanced for its period in terms of whether it is hydro engineering or whether it is the architectural brilliance or the governance, trade and commerce, including logistics. They had their own shipping dock in Lothal. All this. So it was pretty advanced civilization, even around 4000, between 5500 to 4000 BCE as old. So if there is a development, what causes the development? So we will try to answer that question. So there were urban planning, including drainage systems, standardized weights and measures in the Harappan excavations. We also have, like I have already mentioned, the DNA studies suggesting that there were a lot of cultural exchanges between places as far as Persia and others. So, all this is something that most of us are aware or know through different sources. And we have a pride. But there is another belief that has been thrust upon us, especially for people who live in India, that when the Britishers or when the colonial powers arrived, India was in its dark ages. So it was mostly poor, illiterate, suffered a lot of social oppressions and other social issues, which required an intervention from a foreign uh, power to resolve this. And the colonial powers were doing India a favor by ruling upon us. So this is a narrative that has been built directly and very succinctly through our education system itself. That's the hard part of it. So it's the case of a grateful slave, post-independence India. Why is it important to know the 18th century India? Is, like I said, it's very easy for us to accept and move on that the ancient past India was glorious. But understanding the recent past is even more crucial because that dictates the effect. And also the tendency to question the traditional knowledge systems by the uh, let me call as brainwashed Indians or others who cannot accept the viability of a non-Western model because of a being completely colored in a colonized mindset. It is essential to know what happened in the recent past. I'll just take 5 or 7 minutes to quickly run you through this. Now, this was the share of world economy. I'm sure some of you might have come across this. So, right from 1700 up till or earlier, we would see that we were contributing to 25, approximately 25 percentage of the global trade. So our contribution to world economy was close to 25%. It was 2% at the time of independence. Or to put it in perspective, around 1750 was the time the colonial powers started having a say in the administration. And by 1857, they were they had established themselves as the credible rulers of India. 1947 is when India got independence. So during this span of 200 plus years, India, which was contributing to 25% of the global economy, was reduced to contributing only 2%, in spite of it having all its um, yes.
I'm very curious to ask us a quick question here. Um, so, where does this data come from? This data, like, what would be the source that one can use to, like, reference this data?
Yeah, I have picked up this particular chart from World Economic Forum. I will share the link.
Okay.
Uh, Probably the details of this data will be there. I will have a look, but it is a credible from a credible source. But what is the input? I am not very much sure. The reason for showing this was to have to understand the relationship between the economic prosperity and advancement of the knowledge systems, because one
Absolutely.
is obviously dependent upon the other,
Uh,
it's contingent upon the
absolutely.
others. So I will
Absolutely.
share at the end of the session.
Yeah. Sorry
But
for the interruption. I thought it was important to call this out that these are
yes,
not
yes,
made up numbers. These are
yes.
coming from a legitimate source. Thank you.
So when we speak of these, it is important to know that a prosperous society or the prosperity of the society depends on its knowledge process. Without having a good and a robust knowledge centric centrism in the society, prosperity to this scale is impossible. Because normally, when we look at this dependency, we see that the knowledge as a process has four stages. One is the generation of the knowledge and the acquisition of the knowledge through systematic inquiry. Once that knowledge acquisition has taken place, it's more important to adapt that knowledge through whatever requires to suit that particular situation. So the adaptation through innovation, that is the next stage. So the knowledge has to be adaptable to suit the various requirements of the various fields, the needs, and the uh, understanding the limitations of the operating environments. The next stage is the dissemination of the knowledge. And it happens normally through the formal channels, the regular uh, that we understand, and also through informal channels. The transfer of knowledge is from the knowledge developer to the user, or rather, one who would be applying that knowledge in the various fields of the society. The last stage is after the knowledge dissemination has taken place, it is put for application. And while doing, the skilled workforce or the workforce is upskilled enough to use that knowledge in the respective field to achieve the desired result. So this is the normal knowledge process that undergoes. And a society which has developed this to perfection would automatically ensure that any field that it is touching upon, it is not random. The decisions are not taken at random. Most importantly, the systems in place are not serving mere archaic value, but the systems in place are adaptable for usage. So this adaptability, knowledge being adaptable to usage, is very, very important for the society to make progress. We find that all these four processes of knowledge are perfectly developed in India. And it is because of this systematic orientation, India was able to make substantial progress in multiple fields. I will just take two or three case examples, because this is where normally uh, the Western ideas uh, or the colonial ideas are thrust upon us. One is education. We all believe that the school education was introduced in India by the Britishers, but not many would be aware that it was the other way around. India had schooling system. All these are recorded documents available on the net for anyone to study. So there were at least 7 systematic studies undertaken by the colonists to understand the schooling system or the education system in India, right from 1707 onwards. Finally, it was Andrew Bell who studied the Madras schooling system, or they were called as Thinnai Pallikudam in Tamil. So this Madras system was studied in detail by Andrew Bell, and he published a pamphlet 1797, and it was tabled in the British Parliament, and it was adapted. So the formal education in Britain was using the system which we call as the Thinnai Pallikudam or the Madras system, as it is. So schooling was not a gift of the colonial masters. So yeah, so William Andrews' survey documented over 1 lakh village schools just in Bihar and the Bengal. And Thomas Munro's observation of every village having one school. The same for the Bombay presidency, because at the time there were only 5 or 6 states, unlike the multiple states today in India. So Bombay presidency covered practically the entire western one. Madras presidency including the Kerala, Andhra, and Karnataka. So it clearly shows that the systematic schooling system was available. This is how the Thinnai Palli looked like. We also have information of what was taught in these schools, the syllabus that was taught, the methodology that was adopted in these village schools or localized schools. So one thing was that the education system was completely decentralized. So it was adaptable to suit the requirement of the local people, to the local community. A farmer would have a different requirement than a trader. So the system was changed. When I speak of this, I am not giving a mere statement like this. The mathematical tables were different for a farmer and different for a trader. One was based on the volumetric, the other was based on numerical. And the tables are also available in the form of manuscripts in French Institute, Pondicherry. It was called as Ponnilakkanam and Nellilakkanam. Nellilakkanam was more of a volumetric tables. Ponnilakkanam was more of numerical compounding, interest, and kind of thing, which is more for a trader. So this is what we mean by a localized form of education. And it was inclusive. This is another thing, that the education rights were denied to a larger section of people, and exclusive rights to it were held by only a small section of people. All these are the poisons that have been injected into the mindset of people, and we have been, or we have completely forgotten, the generation has completely forgotten to question. That was the hallmark of Indian knowledge system, questioning. That was something that was never done. For example, I just present a very small statistic. I'm very sorry, I don't know if this is even visible. I'll try to zoom in a bit. Now, this table gives a distribution of schools in several districts: Mushirabad, Birbhum, Burdwan, South Bihar, the entire Bihar and the Bengal region. And in that, the distribution of community. So I will just take one region so that you can at least read it clearly. You see the caste-wise distribution of the students in the school. You will find that practically every community was educated in the same school, not different schools. So this, the fact that the education rights were denied, and there is no denial that there was some kind of an mismatch and kind, but it was not the overall picture. That's what it is. Aberrations are always there in every place, but the system was in place. So this will clearly tell us that there was, our Indian education system was inclusive, or else we cannot, or we could not have achieved the kind of progress if the workforce is not skilled. So in the next session, we will try to see what was the approach, the holistic approach towards education bias. Okay, the second comes the prosperity. This again is a data. Madras University conducted a survey in Chengalpattu, which is a district next to its capital, Chennai. It showed that in 1780s, an average per day labor of an farmer or an agriculturalist was 7 rupees 50 paise. This survey was done in 1975. And in 1975, it was 2 rupees 50 paise. So we can imagine the level of prosperity that the agriculturalists enjoyed before the system was completely taken over by the colonial masters. So it was a prosperous society. That's the point to be made. So what caused the loss of Indian system? The destruction of village economy, and most importantly, the the fact that our cultural pride was destroyed. We were made to believe in what they wanted us to believe. That's the most important thing. And this happened by the introduction of the Macaulay education policy in India. So what was localized became more centralized, including education. So they were able to dictate what we would learn. So this loss of village autonomy, added to the fact of very high triple uh, taxes at times, had a complete, and also with the onset of the industrial revolution, India was not given its due share to contribute. All these uh, contributed to the loss of civilizational continuity, or the knowledge systems. So today, uh, many of the practical arts, which we call as kalas, we will see that classification into the Vidya sthanas, kalas, and the others. So the kalas aspect, which was the main bread and butter for most part of the society, is lost to us. We are left with a lot of information in the Vidyasthana areas, and as well as in the Shastra areas. But it is the Kala that has the practical sciences, the practical crafts that has suffered the most. So we will see more about uh, the Indian knowledge systems in the upcoming session. If you have any questions, I shall try to answer now.
First of all, thank you so much for such an enlightening lecture. My God, there is so much information over here. I can't tell you how excited I am to kind of, even having attended this introductory session, I'm so happy that we are doing this. And I'm so thankful to you for doing this course for us. And I know, like, aside from the technical glitches, which is kind of reducing the turnout that we are seeing over here, I'm pretty sure this is going to become one of the most popular courses, in the time to come. Shekharji, what do you think was the distribution of schools we saw in Madras and Bombay presidencies? It was pretty rich. How about the northern India? Do we have data about that?
Yes, we have the data. I will once again put that entire data list up for
Okay.
you to see.
So in your research, have you seen that the distribution was more or less even across the entire Indian landform or the subcontinent?
See, one thing that is missing is the census. So we have the information about the total number of schools and the total number of enrollments in the schools,
Mhm.
but to what extent did it cater to? That's something. But it is projected using the current population. If we just extrapolate that data and pull it back to where it belongs, clearly around 70 to 75% of the population was not merely literate, but it was educated.
70 to 75% of the entire Indian subcontinent. My
Yes.
God. Okay. So it looks like Romalji's question is very related to the school system. He asks, was the school system mostly Gurukul based? And I'm assuming he's talking about at the onset of the colonizers coming to India. Romalji, maybe you can clarify.
Yeah, yeah. Now I'm able to unmute.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
Yes, yes. So I know Shekharji mentioned that there was a school system which the British actually took. So I was just curious if this school system that was based, especially in near Chennai and all that, was it was it a modification of our old Gurukul system that we had modified in India, or was it the colonists who had modified it?
Most of these schools were single teacher led school, the Ekal
Okay.
Vidyalaya model that we
Ekal
have.
Vidya. Okay.
Yeah, so it was a single teacher led schools, and it had the, yes, you are right, it is modeled upon the pathshalas.
Okay.
But pathshala per se, when we refer to, uh, okay, any shala means an open space. So these schools were conducted at times in the local temples, at times in the village squares. So there were no fixed brick and mortar structure which we could call as school. They were, you can probably call them as learning centers.
Got it. Okay.
Romalji, please introduce yourself so that
Yes.
we all learn about you a little more.
Yeah. My name is Romal Ban, and I am here from Houston, Texas. And Sunita Tikku is my wife. She's also part of this, but she's traveling. She's in Chicago, so she couldn't join. And I've been always, interested in spirituality, and also as part of that, also figuring out how our how our spirituality, or whatever growth we had in India over the centuries, how it withered away. And I've been learning also last 10-15 years that how a lot of our systems were in some way or the other, I would say, taken by the more like the Islamist. I know would they kind of merged with us, and they kind of used it together. But the colonialists actually, they found it like you're explaining. They wanted a more centralized version, so they took it and changed it completely, and then forced it upon us. So, and that's something that, and like you're saying, that when the civilization loses its pride, then everything is a downfall from there. And but yeah, so I'm interested in all this, and I'm also interested in. I've been to Kerala a few times for some Ayurvedic treatment, and I've been reading about libraries. They have a library where they have all the books, and how our Ayurvedic system also, on their wall they show about 150 instruments. So it was not just Ayurveda, but there was surgery also. Now, of course, that got banned by the British, because, or about 100 years ago, by government of India. So it's just on the display. But I'm astounded as to how advanced our system was. And so yeah, so I'm and also interested in our Shaivism, because that's something that I've been like, my dad has a lot of books, and we have been followers of Chinmay. So both Vedantic and Shaiva, we have been following that. So
Thank you,
yeah,
Romalji. Thank you for joining and asking
sure.
a good question there. Shekharji, do you think Gurukuls can come back to India now that we are sort of waking up to this lost history? Do you think this tradition can be brought back?
There are a few attempts. I think it's more than bringing the Gurukul system back. It is the Indic pedagogy to be brought back into the existing system. That will be more pertinent now, or more practical.
I see.
Uh,
I am a student of Kendriya Vidyalaya, and Kendriya Vidyalaya is everywhere. And there is like a more rural arm of that, which is Navodaya Vidyalaya, which is also very common in northern India. So, do you think it's just bringing the kind of education back to these existing infrastructure that is sufficient, or do you feel that because there was a Guru Shishya Parampara that kind of diminished over last few centuries? Do you feel that is still needed, and what can bring that back if it is still needed?
yeah, I think there are places which are working on. There is one Anadi Foundation which is having its own Gurukula. There is one Agastya Gurukulam which works online, which teaches completely based on the Indic pedagogy, based in US, I think. Yeah. So
I think it's based out of Houston, I think, if I remember. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So they have this entire Indic pedagogy based education.
I see.
But having said that, given the demographic setup of India, it's slightly challenging because uh, of the economics of it. Very clear. So to start with, at least the easiest way is to bring a different pedagogy into the existing system, and then probably move on. There is a completely independent movement here for alternative education, wherein they are opting out of the current education system itself, either through home tutoring and all that. But it's all in an experimental phase. But more work is going on with respect to introducing the Indic pedagogic model into the existing curricula. And one such attempt is the NEC, which Government of India brought in, National Education Policy, sorry, NEP, National Education Policy that it brought in. And in that, this IKS division is one such attempt.
Excellent.
And I'm also from Kendriya Vidyalaya.
Oh, you are also from Kendriya. So,
Yeah, me too.
oh, there you go. See, so Kendriya Vidyalaya definitely generates, a more universalist sort of student, at least, if nothing else, right? There is a question by Urvashi ji. Urvashi ji, why don't you ask this question instead of putting it over here on a comment?
Sure. Thank you, Rishik ji. Thank you, Shekhar ji, for your really interesting and intriguing lecture. I had I always had this one intriguing question, which is we talk about our systems, centuries-old systems have been very advanced, and whether it's archaeology, which is giving us the validation, or otherwise also with respect to our documents and documentations. I've always had this question is, if we were so advanced in terms of almost everything, then what led our decline in terms of how did we let this penetrate that we are actually less than the West, and 100, 200 years as against so many centuries? It's just been always very intriguing question. And second is, with respect to the schools which we are talking about, were these schools inclusive with respect to different sections of society or even gender? Just curious about that.
Easy to answer the second question, so I will answer that first. With respect to the gender inclusivity, there is no data for the women being educated in any of these schools. So that is definitely a thing, because I think most of them were educated informally in their respective homes. So these were boys-only schools. But caste inclusivity, I showed the data. It is pretty much spread across all the castes, including some which are classified under the scheduled category.
That's intriguing. That's interesting.
It was there,
Mm.
and it was not a mere lip service also. They were represented to a great extent.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much for that.
So going back to the first question, yeah.
Interesting. Moving to the first question. Any knowledge system, until unless it is adapted and it is economically viable, will not survive. So if you have to hit at the system, you hit at the economy. If you stop making it revenue generating, then the practitioners will start moving in search of other scope for their earnings. Something that we see even now happening. Why is there a large-scale urban migration? Because the rural economy is not giving them sufficient resource or income, that they have to move to the urban centers for making their life more comfortable. Same thing happened. The trades were controlled by the colonial powers. Why did it happen? Yes, a very good question. We did not have the powerful political backup that we had at least up till 13th, 14th century. Post Mughals, though there is the Marathas and others that we speak of were there, it is primarily because of the Marathas who try to neutralize that till 1700 plus we were able to sustain that momentum. But post that, we didn't have a strong political support. So the entire trade operations were taken over by the colonists. And once the trade were taken, we know that the local economy is going to suffer. That is number one. Number two is you push the people who are educated in a particular style. Two, you close down the schools and you make them come to the place of learning that you want, because Macaulay's education policy was that very clear. He made the declaration that he wants to have people who are brown in skin color, but they are English in thinking. And he wanted more clerks for the government jobs. So these were twofold motives. All the so-called Western contributions have been self-centric only. For example, nobody really bothers to look into it, but the most common Sanskrit to English dictionary is Monier-Williams dictionary. I remember most of my professors and lecturers swearing by the dictionary. But when you look into the introduction, Monier-Williams makes it very clear why he puts up this in dictionary. It is so that the Indian scriptures could be shown in poor light in order to glorify Christianity. It's there in the introduction.
Wow. My goodness.
I didn't know that. That's wow.
Yeah.
It's such
Do we
a
have that resource? We should look for that resource as well and put it in our repository.
Yeah, we should definitely. It's so incredible. I don't think once you start looking in this direction, you can just stop by looking at these superficial. I would also call it an attack. Actually, this was an attack on our identity, right? You can't just stop there. I think they penetrated our psyche, and I also agree about the economy being like the biggest driver, in the sense that we are all here in America primarily because of the economic sort of progress that we thought at one point, and maybe it was also true, was not possible in India. And it's fortunate that India is now kind of competing at a level which is hard to ignore. And I think that economic strength, the restoration of economic strength, is probably also a reason why we are also becoming more like able to recognize who we were historically and bring that to the fore. So I find myself very privileged to have company of enlightened people like you, Shekharji. We have already spent 10 minutes over, Shekharji. Would you like to kind of maybe share another parting thought or anything else that you would like to add before we wrap today's session?
No, just one thing. All this introduction, it might look a bit detailed, but the fact is that unless we have this perspective, the upcoming sessions wherein we are going to see the different aspects of our knowledge, including the Vedic information, the darshanas or the philosophy, we shall try to look at it not from the content perspective, because content you can always get it from multiple sources.
Right.
But what was the driving force which was behind that system to come up?
Mm-hmm.
Why was the requirement for, let's say, a Nyaya as a system to come up? Why did Agamas come up as a system? If we understand that, then I think we will get everything in that right perspective and put it in an holistic position.
I love what you said. I think Romanji also seems to agree with that.
Yes.
Do you want to add like a quick comment before we wrap?
No, I one comment was that what you said, why was that thing brought up? If you understand that, then then kind of everything, like you're saying, content is everywhere, but then you can put the content in the right slot and then get the right frame of mind. That makes really good sense. Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly. Yeah, thank you.
So content in the right context is what
Yeah.
we are going to learn in the next upcoming sessions.
Yes.
And we also had that same kind of conversation with Dr. Mrinal Kaur earlier in the call, earlier in the week, where, I requested him to bring some historical context. He was a little hesitant. He said, you dilute the philosophy if you talk about the history. And I respect that view. But I think a part of our philosophy cannot be fully comprehended or understood or appreciated until we have the whole context in which that philosophy evolved. So I really love that idea. And once again, thank you for a wonderful lecture today, Shekharji. And
Thank
hope
you.
we will continue to have more and more people join the call. I'm pretty sure once people watch the recording of this session, they would want to join live and ask you more questions. But until then, thank you so much. Namaskar.